Hello and welcome to episode 29 of Missle Industries' Ford Falcon 351 Crusty wagon project. Now, last episode I spent 3 days getting my extractors into the car. I had initially thought, as you often do when you plan a project, I can knock this out in a weekend. No, it didn't happen. So at the end of the weekend I had the extractors in and clearanced after probably 3 installation and clearance sessions before it all worked out and I ran out of days. So this weekend the extractor's in and it's now time to build a merge pipe down to the mufflers at the back of the car underneath the rear seats. So that's the lofty goal for this episode, and I have already chopped up all the pipe work from my VY donor exhaust, and now it's time to try and cobble things together to see if I can get it all to work and make sense. Now the merge pipe is going to link the two banks of the exhaust system together, so that's going to require some tricky cutting and shutting to make it all work, because the merge pipe came out of a VY Commodore and I'm just going to repurpose it for this car, which means it's going to need to sit far enough forward so it doesn't sit underneath the tail shaft as it actuates through its range of motion. So far I think I can get away with this, but I'm not going to know for sure until I start tacking pieces of metal together to see what happens. So that's what this is largely going to be about. Here is the merge pipe on the bench. What I think I'm going to do is I'm going to repurpose these cut-off pieces to flare the pipe out like that rather than the way it was, because that's not very much use to me for this application. So I'll tack those in so they sit somewhat flush with the floor pan, and that will give me the piece I need to continue the pipe down next to the drive shaft, hopefully to the exhaust pipes, because that would be awesome. It's time to bust out my birthday present from my wife. These are called tacking bands, and if you leave enough metal on your pipe you can clamp these on and then tack them into place where you want them, and then makes your fabrication task much easier. So I'm looking forward to testing these out. There is the tacking band in place. Note how easy it's going to be to get to those joins to throw some tacks on. Really, I need to tack these in 2 places at this point, just so I can locate these pipes for some experimenting. Just like that, my 2 chopped off segments are re-welded at an angle that is more conducive to this project. Tidy up these ends though. Bad. Here are my merge pipe pieces in the cold light of day, and I'm reasonably sure I'm going to have enough radiuses amongst this lot to get the merge pipe connected to the collectors of the extractors and then move on to the rest of the system. So let's get into that. If we look under the car with the position the merge pipe is sitting now, this looks pretty doable. Probably wouldn't hurt for it to move forward a little bit further. It's really going to come down to what I can get away with in terms of angles here. I do have some right angle bends that I can chop up to get the radius that I want, but for the time being I'm going to use all the Commodore donor exhaust and just see what I can and can't get away with. If this sits too far back, it's going to clang into this. We don't want that. If it sits too far forward, it's just not going to lend itself to joining up with these extractors in the position that it's in. But this is how these things go when you do fabrication projects. It's a lot of trial and error and hit and miss, which is why we tack our pipes together and we don't weld them. What I've done here is install the flanges with the bolts and the gaskets to give me an idea of what the gap is going to be between these flanges. So I've taken the measurement, and now it's time to transfer that measurement out onto a work surface where I can mock up my pipes. If we look here on the ground, I've drawn a centre line to line the merge pipe up with, and I have the width of the two sets of the extractors there and there. And now what I need to do is position this stuff to line up with my pipe widths and figure out what I'm going to need to add and take away. So obviously it's going to be chopped along that line. I just need to bridge this gap here and here to make a template for this to start to work. So I have my first thin slice of steel to tack into place to make this gap work for one side of the merge pipe. Time to weld it up and then tack it onto that bit and see if this works. So, progress report. One side of the merge pipe is tacked together. I think there's going to be enough latitude in the flange housing to get away with that kicking in just a little bit too much that way. But what I think I'll do next is I'll stick that up under the car and see how it sits before I go committing to cutting this one up. This is beginning to look more and more like a workable solution. If I angle that up there, I can tuck those pipes in nice and neatly down either side of the transmission tunnel, which would be super awesome for my ground clearance. So that's what the aim of the game is going to be. Going to make a piece of pipe from here to here, and I will tack it in with the intention of having these pipes sweep up to either side of the drive shaft, and hopefully that means I can install my mufflers nice and high and tight, tucked away, out of the way of scrapage. We are moving ever closer to victory. I've cut a wedge and clamped it into there to merge this pipe with this pipe. It appears to be working. The only thing is I've got to finesse this end here, which I will do by cutting this bit down inside the flange until this bit here lines up properly. But that's all sandwiched together and that looks pretty usable, so I'm going to tack that and then finesse it from there, tack that in, slide those two joints out. And there we have it, the interim result for a few well-placed tacks and some fortuitous bends. Now that I've tacked that out on the floor, I'm going to go stick it under the car and see what clearances I'm going to need to work into all of this. There you have it, mocked into place. It's going to take a little bit more fine tuning, and I'll tack the pipe into those flanges, and then we'll work on getting some pipes onto the back here so I can start figuring out how the mufflers are going to hang. But so far so good. And there it is, tacked up. I've just got under the car and put a handful of tacks on all of that. Now I need to pull it out and trim up these ends so I can add some pipe to them. Really isn't that much distance between the ends of the pipe and where the exhaust pipes are supposed to sit, or rather where the mufflers are supposed to sit, so I don't think I'm going to need too much more pipe, to be honest. It's time to go trim those ends up and add some extra pipe. So the next step here is to repurpose these 2 lengths of metal from my VY exhaust system, cut them there, and then weld these sections to this end here, and use these bends here to locate the mufflers, because they're going to need to kick outwards towards the exhaust exits at the back of the car. So I'll incorporate these bends and hopefully tack those mufflers onto the bends, and then try and figure out how it's all going to hang under the car. Let's get stuck into chopping. So there is the basic gist of my plan. Muffler, muffler, and then figure out how to get those back boxes to connect to the car, then hang the whole system up and see how it sits. So the plan going forward is going to mean running these pipes parallel to the drive shaft, and then taking advantage of that angle to hang the box between this angle and that factory muffler mount there. Now I've measured the boxes, and the boxes are only 280 millimeters, and this gap here is about 350 millimeters, so that gives me options to put a little bit of another cut on that pipe to modify the angle to sweep in further or out further depending on what I need. So it's looking pretty good right now that I'm going to be able to build this entire midsection of exhaust with VY Commodore muffler parts, which is going to be great. Well, that's the next section's tacked up. It's actually kicked out a lot further than I'd hoped, so I'm going to fit it under the car and see if I can get away with that. Well, here's the view under the car, and I've got to say, if I can make those angles work, that's all good as it is, because there's plenty of clearance between the power shaft, the pipes and the bodywork. Actually jacked it up because it's got quite a bit of sag in it now, there's some weight in it, so I've jacked it up to take the weight to make sure that when I hang this exhaust system it doesn't droop too far. So it's time to figure out if I can get the mufflers in there clocked like that, or is I going to need to add a bend to this to kick it around this way and have them parallel to the car. So indulge me while I think out loud here. As far as I can tell, if I find some radiuses to connect those back boxes to my existing exhaust system so far and have the back boxes facing parallel to the car, these mandrel bent rear sections will mate right up to the outlet of the back boxes. I might have to cut this bit here off the back of this rear section and spin it round because wagon. It is different to the sedan. If you see there, the sedan has the upsweep and then it sticks out through the cutouts underneath the bumper. The wagon does not have any kind of arrangement for cutouts under the bumper, so I think I'm going to cut that section there, possibly spin it around so it faces the other way, so I get some pipe sticking out underneath my bumper, and tuck this up as high as I can get it. And I might weld a V-band flange to the outlet of that back box, or both the back boxes, and then I can basically figure out how to join all this stuff together. So that's where I'm at with that. So I need 2 more radiuses on my centre section to sort this project out and start hooking the mufflers up. Now I've got this nice radius I cut from my VY donor exhaust, but all the rest of my offcuts are different angles, so I've cheated and I've cut, whoops, I've cut what remains into pieces so that I can replicate this angle. I had it all sorted before, and it goes like that. There we go, that's the problem. I spin that round like that, eventually gives me the radius that I want. Take my word for it. So I spin the 2 pieces like this around, it gives me a matching radius that I can deploy for this project without cutting up all of my non-merge pipe options. All this metal here was for my non-merge pipe project. So if this merge pipe works out, I'll put all this stuff aside for something else. But if the merge pipe fails, I'm going to use all this stuff to make a non-merge pipe center exhaust section. All of it. I don't want to cut it up just yet. I will cobble together what I can from my VY exhaust until it's all gone. And there we have it. I've scrounged the last radius that I need from my scrap, and it looks perfectly fine, doesn't it? Until you turn it like that and you realise what I've done, you're like, woof! Still works though, claiming it. Alright, time to get that exhaust system back out of the car and tack these on. Well, the length of the pipes is slightly out. What I'm concerned about is if I put a straight edge over the top of these pipes, do all the edges meet the straight edge, and they do. There's a fair amount of wriggle room to be had if I use the V-bands next. So far so good. This is all going surprisingly well. Okay, what I think I'm going to do now is clean up the inlets on those 2 Redback mufflers, then splooge a fair amount of weld onto those mufflers and connect them firmly to the merge pipe section, and hopefully that will be enough to hold them together while I move them around under the car. This is all starting to get quite heavy now, so hopefully my tacks hold, because we're getting to the penultimate part of this, which is when I hang the exhaust system. So I'll weld that, but first I'll grind them up to tidy everything up as best I can before I weld it all up. And then after that I'm going to put some hangers under the car. I've got a pair of OEM hangers to suit a sedan, which I'm going to need to modify because the floor pan is different. That's okay, and once this exhaust system is under the car and the hangers are attached to those mufflers, calling it, that's it. I'll pick the rest up on another episode. Hopefully with a startup video. That'd be nice. As promised, I have splooged those mufflers on with a whole lot of weld. This is the nice looking side, so this is the side you're going to see. You don't want to see the other side. Trust me, you don't. But it's all together and it's holding itself under its own weight. So what I should do is find those exhaust hangers, get them out and modify them using the one exhaust hanger that I have with the car as a template. So here are the exhaust hangers to suit a sedan, which was all that was available on the eBay, so that's what I ended up with. These are different to the station wagon hangers because the station wagon has a flat floor, whereas these tuck up behind the seat in the sedan floor pan, which is completely different. So the plan is to cut a wedge out of these along the fold line here, fold them down, re-weld them, and then install them into the underside of my wagon and figure out how they're going to orientate in relation to my mufflers and how I'm going to attach them to the mufflers. Am I going to go with muffler clamps, or am I going to weld these straight to my mufflers? These are all variables I'll work my way through because that's just how I roll. So here is the wagon muffler hanger from 1977, blasted with red dirt all its life, and I reckon my plan will play out. I will give those a cut across there, fold, weld and install, and then we move on to the next phase. I think I'm going to get away with that. Should go bend the other one and then weld them both up. There we have it. Both exhaust hangers are modified to suit the flat floor of the wagon. As you can see now, they replicate the style of the wagon hanger nicely. Now it's time to go fit into the car and see if I can hang this exhaust system. There we go. Exhaust hangers have been hung. As you can see, I've scrounged up sufficient bolts to get these both into position. Now it's time to go and reinstall my exhaust and see where everything sits. So once again I have test fitted my merge pipe exhaust system to the underside of Crusty wagon, and while I have the exhaust hangers in, they're not quite where I need them to be. As you can see from there, They're pretty damn close, but I'm out of time. I'm going to need to modify this system again because one of my pipes is uncomfortably close to my handbrake cable. It's actually resting on the frame for the handbrake cable, so that's no good. I'm going to have to cut this bank up just a little bit to move off the edge of the chassis rail, but overall I'm pretty happy with that. It's taking shape and I just need to finesse it, but that's going to have to be the subject of the next episode because this has taken me quite some time to get this far, and I need to pull those extractors out, weld them, fit the gaskets up so I get the correct clearances for those output flanges so that I can start welding all this up in place to figure out how much movement I'm going to get. So progress is being made slowly but surely, but that is enough for this episode because I'm out of time again. One final note before I do the summary for this episode. I'm currently into this merge pipe project to the tune of $101. So that was $26 for the flange kit for the front of the merge pipe exhaust system and $75 for the two exhaust hangers at the back. Obviously there are incidentals like gas and welding wire and the VY exhaust system, which I had lying around anyway. So far so good. In summary, I'm into episode 2 of this exhaust building project, and join me next time where I make further incremental progress getting an exhaust system into Crusty wagon for minimal cost. Rest assured, at the end of this exhaust build, I will give a rundown of all the costs out of pocket to get the exhaust system to where I wanted it to be. I have no idea how much it would have cost to pay somebody else to do this. I was never going to entertain that idea anyway, because this is strictly a budget project. Budget.